I'm Mom Rad, and we are here with Callie Barr, who is running for Michigan's 1st U.S. Congressional District. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We were very excited to come up here and to be able to do this in person.
And like way up here.
Really? Way up here?
You came to the great up north, yes.
We did. It's beautiful up here. It really is, you know, compared to down in the sort of southern area. It's a definitely different pace here.
Yes.
And I've been to Traverse City a couple times, and it's nice. It's like you don't have to leave the state to kind of get away and have a nice vacation.
That's right. Well, and we're not, in this district too, we've got the entire Upper Peninsula, so true up north. And then Traverse City is kind of more of one of our southern points because we've got then half the mitten too. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's nice because it's sort of like that city. You can see the lakes and big, beautiful, and then you go up to like Tequamanon Falls, which I need to visit again. I've been there once. So beautiful. We have you know what? People are shocked whenever I tell them we have mountains. I'm like, well, they're small, but we do have mountains, the Porcupine Mountains. So as far as running, how has it been this year?
Running it's been really great this year. We have a lot of folks that are really engaged. I think across this district really feel the urgency of the moment. We're living at a time right now where we have the greatest income inequality that has ever existed. Right now we're seeing gas prices increase. We have folks that have lost their health insurance. The cuts to Medicaid are already impacting our rural hospitals. And so for people here, this is something that's impacting their everyday life in an area where it's already at points been a struggle just to stay ahead, just to put a roof over your head, just to feed your family. And so because of that, I think we have a lot of people that just want to do something. They want to be involved, and they want a congressional representative who is here, who's listening. Our current representative hasn't had a public town hall in over 8 years.
Really?
8 years. So it's like, do your job. Just do your job. Come here, listen to people, touch grass. See we got a lot of snow now, but when we do have grass, come touch it. If there is snow, come shovel it, right? Be here with us and know what we need. And the problem is when you have someone who doesn't, they don't make good decisions for us. Right. And that's why you have like tax breaks for the wealthiest people who've ever existed. That's why you're cutting funding for food to feed hungry kids. That's why you cut funding for rural hospitals, things that don't make sense for people that actually live in the district.
Absolutely. And you guys just recently had quite the snowstorm.
Oh, my word. Yes. Yes. Well, we've had a lot. We've had a recent snowstorm. I've got a Malamute. He was even looking at me cross-eyed, So we're seeing 3-4 foot drifts of snow. But we've also had, ice storm in this district that was brutal. And already folks are paying higher costs in their utility bills for that, and hoping to get FEMA money. That was something, when you kind of go through and demolish the federal government. Bergman was part of DOGE, and then turn around and say, well, hey, now we need FEMA to help us. That feels really disingenuous. We do have, I know, the governor working on getting us some of that FEMA money. So hopefully that means that it helps people on the ground. It helps folks pay their utility bills. So we'll see.
Right. And, speaking of that ice storm, it's been a huge thing for the UP and the people when it comes to, being in Congress and putting things in place where, the people in the district are prepared and sort of have that available to them. Like, what does the plan look like to make sure that when inevitably this does happen again, that, you can take care of those people, that they aren't left, footing the bill that really an organization like FEMA should cover for them?
Well, and we're going to have natural disasters, right? We're going to have natural disasters. And that's, we get folks that, of course, we know, like sometimes there's areas that we can cut. Right, in the federal government. There was a woman I met and she said, listen, cut the fat but not the arteries, right? And I agree with that. And what we've done is really chaotic. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's not just cuts to FEMA, right? It was also folks who work in our national parks. we're in an area where it's a beautiful area. You talked about that, but we have a lot of we have parks. I mean, we're a tourist economy. We have people who come up, they want to be in the woods. They want to go visit our federal parks. And I've talked to our rangers, and they said, look, we don't have what we need right now, right? It's a lot of window dressing. Might look good on the outside, but internally, it's a mess. Mm-hmm. And if we want to protect and conserve our natural resources, we want to make sure that we're taking care of them. And that means during natural disasters, it means even when we don't have natural disasters, that we're making sure we have the right folks in place.
Right. And speaking of, you mentioned the hospitals and how those cuts, are removing these hospitals from these rural areas, how, people have to drive so far to get to these hospitals. And when it comes to rural life, you've even mentioned that, when it comes to maintaining that way of life, attracting families to these areas. That's right. And nobody wants to live in a region where, you have to drive over an hour to have a baby or to take your kid to the emergency room. When it comes to what these rural areas need in regards to healthcare, to make sure that these towns don't become ghost towns, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And our hospitals are, in many ways, our largest employer. And so when you have hospitals that hurt or shut down services, you're also losing folks who were in your community who could spend money at local business, who are putting their kids in the local school. And so the impact is deeply, deeply felt beyond just even the healthcare concerns that you have. We've had like 3 labor and deliveries that have closed within the past year. Can you imagine being pregnant up in the Upper Peninsula and having to drive into Wisconsin? I mean, that's a reality. That's a reality. And then I think about our local law enforcement. We have law enforcement that's like, are they going to be delivering babies on the side of the road, right? I mean, you think about all the impacts this has, or mental health services. If we can't get people the mental health services they need, the impact that has then on our social safety net and our first responders too. I mean, this is a much more far-reaching issue. And we have people who care. We have wonderful nurses and physicians and people who are working really hard, and they're just working harder with less.
Right.
Right? And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me when we could be funding our hospitals. We could be doing that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we could find billions of dollars to give tax breaks, again, to the wealthiest people who've ever existed, or billions of dollars right now every day in Iran, mm-hmm. right? We need to take care here at home.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the current congressional representative, yes. when it comes to the things that he's doing, you said he hasn't had a town hall in over 8 years. When you're talking to people, do they feel like he's addressing any of their needs? Do you feel that, I think I've heard he's been called Louisiana Jack.
Yes, I've heard that. I've heard that. Very absent. And we wouldn't allow this really. I mean, we work hard up here in upper and northern Michigan. It's people who are gritty and who work hard, and we would never accept someone, a colleague, to get paid to do a job and not do it, mm-hmm. right? Not show up, not meet with people. And, look, if you disagree with someone, you still meet with them. That's the job, right? That should be the job. I've told folks, look, when I win this seat, I'm going to meet with people, and we're doing that right now all across the district. And if we disagree about something, at least you can come out and yell at me about it, right? It'll be cathartic. But you'll be able to come and talk to the person who's supposed to be listening to your issues and representing you in Washington, D.C. And I think what we've lost too is this idea that, this congressional seat is not a seat for Republicans. It is not a seat for Democrats. This is a seat for the people of upper and northern Michigan. And there's a sense that in our extreme partisanship and this tribalism, that we've forgotten that a congressional representative is supposed to represent the unique needs of their community.
Right. You're not just here to represent the Democrats or the Republicans.
That's right.
You are representing the people
exactly.
of that district, and their specific needs. And, when you were talking about the affordability crisis and things like that, do you feel like that in rural Michigan, it's sort of like the canary in the coal mine, or people are kind of hit harder before we see that sort of in the more urban areas?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a really good metaphor. I'm going to steal it. I do think that, take gas, for instance. We see gas rising right now. Well, people here in upper northern Michigan, we drive a lot more. So that impact is felt pretty immediately, right? We have a housing crisis. And so I have a lot of people that even to drive into work, whether it's Sheboygan, Traverse City, Sioux, St. Marie, Ironwood, whatever it is, they're driving over an hour to get to work. So already that impact is being felt. Our hospitals cutting programs that don't make money. They're already doing that right now because their margins were thin even prior to this, right? They were already really struggling to do the best that they could. And so absolutely, we do see an affordability crisis here it's real, it's urgent. If you look at ALICE stats throughout the district, that's something I always like to keep an eye on. That is our asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So that would be our working poor. These are people who are working. They are working, and they are working hard, and they're still not making it. And that's why our platform is an affordable life. I went back and I said, what are our founding promises of this country? And it was, we're equal people, and that we have an inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I said, what does that mean? What's it mean to have a shot? What's in a life? And what's in a life it's an acronym. L is local housing. I is income, which how do we make sure we have an income? We think about protecting Social Security. We have child care. We support our unions. We make sure that we're protected in an age of AI. F, we need food. We need to support our farmers. We got people with family farms that can't farm them anymore, and fertilizer costs are rising, and tariffs have hurt them. We need to protect our farmers' local food supply. And E, essential health care. We have to have health care. And we think about our small businesses that are struggling to stay afloat. And the impacts of health insurance and having to provide that. So we can do good things here. It's just we gotta make a choice that we're gonna matter for the next 100, 200 years.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that, tax breaks for these billionaires.
Yes.
You mentioned income inequality.
Big time.
People hear about that. What does it look like, being the congressional representative? What does it look like to fix that imbalance?
Okay, well, it's tax policy, right? I mean, if you go back and you say, hey, we look at, let's go to the 1950s, the 1960s, for the top 1%, the tax rate was like 96%, I believe, or right around there. Today, it's 37%. Why? Are they not doing well enough? Do they need 4 more yachts, right? Should we really be taking that from hungry kids? This is the first time in modern American history where the federal government has not guaranteed that the disabled, the elderly, and children would have access to food in the wealthiest country on earth. Why would we allow this, right? And when you think about even the promise of what America is, it was outrageous in its time at our founding when we said all people are equal, because we were living in a class society where people believed they were ordained by God to be better than other people, right? And to say that at that time threw kings off their thrones and inspired worldwide revolution. And I would argue that today we are facing a time when we have certain people who have consolidated wealth and power and have the ability to surveil and use propaganda in a way unmatched in modern history, who have decided they're better. That they're better than us, they deserve more than us, and that they should rule over us. That's not what a democracy is. That's not what a democracy is. And I think to own our economic power is a way to then have power also in our democracy.
And when it comes to your ideal of what you want Northern Michigan to look like, what does that look like for people? If you are, say you've been able to do everything you want to do and you're selling life in Northern Michigan to somebody.
Affordable life, yes.
That affordable life, is that just, you can afford childcare, you can afford education, your kids will get a good education in this area.
Yeah, that's right, and you have choices. You know, think about how often people are taking, you know, they're forced to take a job or be in something because there are no other options. You know, we want to be able to thrive here, whether it's, you know, having capital for small businesses so they can really be supported. It's a kid who wants to go into the trades. You know, it's having the ability, if you want, to be able to go to college. It's going to be tough, right? We just had limits, I believe, if this is still a case, put on how much someone can borrow to even go to college, right? So we want to have opportunity here. We want to have opportunity to have a real shot in childcare. I mean, New Mexico figured it out. They're the poorest state in the union. I have a lot of women I talk to around the district, mostly women, who are like, I would love to work. I'd love to. I can't, right? Childcare is more expensive than my mortgage, right? But housing is another really big one that we got to figure out up here, that you can own a home, right? The very simple thing, home ownership, that you can be able to put a roof over your head.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when my kids were younger, you know, making that decision of with how expensive childcare is, and knowing that if that was taken care of, you could further your career to be able to get on your own 2 feet and provide more for your family and to be able to do it on your own. Yeah. But you feel like, you know, it's that, well, after childcare, I might come home with what, $200 a week? And then that goes to what, gas and things like that?
Well, right. And then the other thing is, like, even after all of that, if you're doing really well, what we can't have happen is that you go bankrupt because you're sick, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So these are basic needs. That's really what it is. You know, I want people in upper and northern Michigan to be able to have an affordable life, and that means to be able to enjoy life, to be able to have your basic, to be able to work hard and have those basic, very basic needs.
And you mentioned education, you know, going to college. I know that Bridge, Michigan recently published an article talking about how the rates of children in northern Michigan who go to school 12 months after graduation is really low. These numbers are close to that in like Flint and Detroit. Children are having to make the choice between staying home, you know, in the place that they love, and then going off to college and things like that. You know, when it comes to classes that are offered, there are very few AP classes that are offered. There are very few, you know, like IB classes, those higher level learning. There are teachers who say, you know, they don't send home homework because kids at home don't have resources to actually do that homework. And then if you have a doctor's appointment, you know, on a school day, it's so long you're gone from school the entire day. So there's clearly something that's struggling in education in northern Michigan that needs to be fixed, that children deserve to have options, choices.
You know what I would say is that we don't have an education problem. We have wonderful teachers, we have wonderful superintendents, we have people that are just doing, they're doing everything they can. They're doing everything they can. What we have is a poverty problem. That's what we have. And when you solve for that, then you take care of a lot of things. Right now, we're asking our teachers in our schools to be counselors, to be mental health therapists, to be where kids get all their food for the day. We're asking them to be everything. Everything. We're asking them to be childcare. We're asking them to be all the things. And we love our schools for doing that, but what makes that really hard is that then on top of that, we're taking funding from them. Their infrastructure needs upgrades. There's a lot there, but the educational piece is there. Our teachers are doing it. Our superintendents are doing it. They're doing great work, and they're working as hard as they can. But when you have had a standard of decline for the past 40 years and our per capita income going down, related to that for the past 30, 40 years, and when we know when you take a standardized test and you can correlate it directly to income level, the problem here is poverty, right? The problem here is a housing crisis. If I need more teachers and there's nowhere to live, I'm gonna have a hard time getting staff and teachers. So to me, it's when we can solve for these basic needs, when we can solve for people being able to participate in the economy the way they should be able to when they're working hard, we're gonna see these fallout effects, but they're really not the meat of it.
So it's like you cut the funding for these things and then everything falls. So when you build that back up, then everything's able to kind of like the childcare, the housing, the food insecurity, the health care. You solve all those problems, and then it's like there's that painting with the flowers over
hierarchy,
there.
right?
Right.
Exactly. That's right.
You provide, the necessities, and then the garden kind of blooms, I guess, to make a terrible analogy. And then when it comes to running in this race, there's you, there's Kyle Blomquist, and there's Wayne Stiles, and Zebulon Featherly. What sets you apart in this primary from the other people running?
Yeah, we can win. I've run before. We did really good things in that race in 2024, increased our raw vote total 40,000 votes, which was really great, flipped a county. In 90% of the districts from the last presidential to 2024, we actually shifted in 90% of the counties, this is huge because we're half the state of Michigan, right?
Yeah.
And so we have more work to do, but we've also built off of those gains. In 2024, we have a massive volunteer network. I mean, it's incredible. It's moving. How many people we have that are coming out that really are ready to retire Jack Bergman.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. Yeah.
It's like I was telling you before this started that, when I started doing interviews, I mean, I was getting people who really wanted me to come and interview you the way that people talked about you. It's like you are someone people know as a person. You are someone people know as a community member. And I think it's especially important in this day and age that you are authentic, that people know you, that they feel like you understand what it's like to live in Northern Michigan, because you do live in Northern Michigan. You don't live in Louisiana, And I think that really resonates with people in this district in particular, especially in contrast to someone like Bergman, where, people are so used to him not being around that, it transcends party and becomes who is here for me, And so I was really excited when I got this opportunity to interview you, because people seem really, really excited about you in particular, and they feel like they can connect well to you. And so I feel like that says something really good.
Thank you. That makes me feel good.
But I think that says something, when you hear somebody talk about someone else, when you're not around, they could say anything. But the way that they speak of you, they definitely, come on, interview Callie Barr, talk to Callie Barr. And just the way that they speak about you, because you can hear people talk about, politicians and think they're great, but when they talk about you, it's from a position where they feel like you can relate to them, where they feel like you are part of the community, that you are sort of a people's candidate, That being said, as someone who's local, what is your favorite part about Northern Michigan?
It's the people. It's the people. The people here are earnest, and they work hard, and they're gritty, and they're creative and innovative. We have a deep bench in this area, and I think one of the coolest things would be to be able to take the determination and the creativity of the people that I meet here and bring that to Washington, D.C. My family goes back 5 generations in the Sheboygan area, Sheboygan with a C there at the tip of the mitt. And to your point, one of the coolest things about running has been meeting people who are like, hey, I knew your grandma, or, your grandpa and I did the fairgrounds together, for a long time. And feeling like maybe there was someone they could trust, maybe they could have a voice. I meet people here who have just felt for so long like they're little people and like they don't matter. And I know what it's like. I remember my husband being in Afghanistan and the family losing their houses in the housing crisis, and feeling the shame of poverty, or feeling like you didn't have a voice. I know what that feels like, and I know what it feels like to feel like you just can't get ahead. And so to even run, to be able to meet with the people I love in this community, that has been really kind of the greatest honor of my life. And so when you say, what do I love here the most, it's hands down the people. And I think that has been the greatest hurt of the the polarization in our politics and the stuff we hear on TV and media, that you can't trust your neighbor, right? That they might be out to get you. That's the greatest lie of all of this, because we are all we've ever had. Mm-hmm. And I see it throughout this whole district. You know, I remember guy the other, you know, not after the 2024 election, and he's wearing his Trump hat, and I'm coming with groceries, and he's opening the door for me. You know, here you go, sweetheart. Can I help you bring those to your car? I think about like the pancake breakfast I was at this morning, where a whole community showed up for firefighters. We love each other. We do. At the core of it, we do. And I feel that here in this home, in this district, and I will fight for it my whole life.
I have definitely found, living in a rural area, that there's a certain stereotype about people who live in rural areas. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, they know. I was at, it was one of those meetings for the data centers down in Howell Township, you know, and they understand what the people at Google think of them. Mm-hmm. and how they view them. And I think that when you have a representative who's never around, who doesn't live here, who, you know, it seems like that's their career, that's how they're making money, with the juxtaposition of someone who views them as people. Because I think they very much feel dehumanized in the way that some people think of them. That, you know, well, who cares if you're rural and poor? Who cares if you're rural and uneducated? Yeah. And I think that what really matters, you know, like when you were saying that, you know, you had mentioned that even if someone disagrees with you, they can come and you'll be there, and they can yell at you.
Right, feel better.
Because they want to be heard. You know, whether or not you guys align, it's just the simple fact of you're there to hear them. And when people feel seen and heard, and like you said, those basic necessities, mm-hmm. Republicans and Democrats, they both need homes. Republicans and Democrats both need health care. Right. Because at that core, you know, like you said, we're people, and people have those needs. And I think that is something that really sets you apart and resonates with people, is that you do love the people. Like, you do love the people. You have that authentic caring that I think, I guess that people are hungry for, you know? And I think, you know, when you talk about tribalism, when you talk about, you know, pitting each other, you know, people kind of at each other, you know, and something that I know, and especially in Northern Michigan and the way of life and the way of rural life, especially somewhere like Michigan, hunting is a big part of Northern life, you know, yes. Deer camp. I feel old when I mention Escanaba in the moonlight. You know, and so firearms are a part of life in Northern Michigan when it comes to hunting, when it comes to sort of living out in the middle of nowhere. And there's always this great fear of, you know, they're coming to take our guns, right? And that's sort of balanced with what we see happening in schools like Oxford, you know, keeping our children and our communities safe. What is the balance between that in, you know, Northern Michigan, where, I mean, people hunt. It's a part of feeding your family, a necessity, especially when you're poor, and then keeping our children safe. Right. How do you see balancing those things?
Well, first I want to thank you for noting that for some families it's a necessity, because I have folks that don't understand that downstate. And I do know families, and I've had folks in my own family where they were counting on a deer to make it through the winter. So that's a very real thing. My family always hunts. My daughter actually got a 6-point this last season. She was very excited about that. My two daughters both hunt. They're always after the prize, who can have the biggest rack, you know. So yeah, I think for a lot of folks in this area, it's like responsible gun ownership, and we get that because we have a respect for what a weapon is and what it can do. We have high rates of service in our district. A lot of people who've served in the military and also understand these are not toys, right? These are weapons, and so it's responsible gun ownership, you know. And we can look at like safe storage, right? Absolutely. We think about even red flag laws. We think about what we passed in Michigan. What was it? It was red flag. We had safe storage, background checks. You know, these are things that I think we all agree on. And we all agree that we should be responsible for our own weapons as well, right? Handguns are the number one issue when it comes to violence and deaths, and especially with children. And that's what we saw both in Michigan, were both, handguns. And so I think for us in these areas, it's recognizing that. And I think most folks do. I'm a mom. I can't tell you how many times I've dropped my kid off at school, and you have that that anxiety, or I've had my daughter say, I don't really feel good today, but they're probably fine and should go to school. But that thought crosses your mind, like, what if she said she wanted to stay home and I took her in and something happened? Mm-hmm. Could I forgive myself? I mean, parents are going through this every day when they're dropping their kids off. That's not okay. That's not okay. And my husband was in the military. He was in the Marine Corps for 15 years. We lived on base. I know you had a husband in the Marine Corps too. There were rules about how you stored your weapons, right? Where they were. I mean, all of that. That's just being smart. Like, let's be smart.
Absolutely. And what's funny is I know people always talk about deer hunting. My husband's boss, they hunt bear, and his children always eat bear burger. And they went to a cookout and had their first beef burger and thought it tasted totally different.
That's so funny.
And I think that's something that people don't think about, that when you live in the city and stuff, you're not eating bear, you're not eating deer like that. But when you live in those rural areas, it is a staple. You try to get what you can, and you fill up your freezer, and that kind of fills in that gap, And so the difference in when you can get one and if you don't, and if you don't have, the ability to afford food other than that, the difference that makes, for your family. So
yeah, big time. Well, and I would say too, even with, I know sometimes folks have anxiety about what red flag laws can be, but those are mostly used by, police officers, by law enforcement. And I support it for their use. That's where we really see the need for that too.
Now, when we're talking about, and you've mentioned veterans, and your husband is a veteran, and your district has a lot of veterans in it, and you sort of briefly mentioned the war in Iran, and when you're elected, what are your thoughts on the war in Iran, and kind of just kind of the whole thing? We're kind of in it now.
We are in it. I don't think anybody is sad that the Ayatollah's gone, right? This was not great. And of course, we're opposed to terrorism and all those things. My husband fought terrorists overseas for 15 years. We lost folks that we love in the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. I can tell you, as a veteran advocate, I became an attorney to help my husband, right? To advocate for other veterans. And in that work, who dealt with families that will be going through and experiencing trauma for their entire lives for the next, 50 years, and then their children. These impacts are generational. They're generational. And so when I think about, post-traumatic stress, folks said post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries, and what we know now, of course, is that if you're anywhere near a falling explosive or a bomb, that blast wave has the ability to rattle your brain around inside your head and cause damage. And so I know already we're going to have service members in these conflicts that are going to need care and going to need help. And so when I say that, when I think about service members that have already been killed in this conflict, anytime that you have that kind of loss, anytime you're creating those kinds of generational injury, you better be damn sure you know what you're doing. And you better have a plan, and you better have a goal. Right now, we're seeing a war looking for a strategy. I don't want to see that, right? I want to know what the plan is, right? We're sending our brothers and sisters over there who are willing to put their name on the dotted line for us. And we better make sure it's worth it, what we're sending them into. Because this doesn't end today. Even if we were to stop tomorrow, then what? Now we're still not taking care of the veterans that we need to take care of from the past 20 years. So I want to know what the plan is. And if you can't give me duration right now, if you're going into a war without the approval of Congress, and now you're asking for $200 billion, the American people need to be able to have a part in that decision. What are we doing? What is the goal? And so for me right now, that's where I'm at. I want to know. We deserve to know. We need absolute transparency on this. I know for the rest of my life, you know, and my husband's journey through post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, we ourselves are going to be dealing with the impacts of war until the day that we die.
And we're creating a whole new generation. And I know that, like, my husband, obviously, he joined after 9/11. And, you know, you think that you go in and, okay, we'll do this. We'll take care of this. And then as a millennial, you know, and having been young in that time, have experienced 9/11, and then to sort of see it happen to a whole nother generation, it does feel disheartening. And, you know, we had talked about, you know, veterans and the way that people talk about supporting our veterans. You know, well, I support the troops, but, you know, these veterans, like you said, they need real, tangible care.
Well, yeah.
They need to know that when they go to the VA, they're going to be taken care of.
Yeah, it's like we got your back.
Right.
And if we got your back, that means we're not defunding the VA, right? And that's what's so frustrating for me, you know, with the incumbent, Jack Bergman, who's a retired Marine Lieutenant General who did most of his service in the reserves, which I'm grateful for anyone who serves in the reserves. That's great, but it's a very different experience from being active duty for 15 years, that's for sure. You better be taking care of those Marines and sailors and service members. And what that means is fully funding the VA. You know, he's voted to not do that. Right now, he's pushing the 2025 Veteran Choice Act to let private companies charge veterans to file benefit claims. That is currently illegal. You cannot do that. And he got paid by these companies, you know, thousands of dollars into his campaign committee. I mean, come on. Do what's right for these veterans. You know, and as an attorney, I know if you're going to let private companies come in, I mean, they're going to be claim sharks swooping up all these veterans who then are going to owe them a ton of money when the service is offered for free through VSOs, so that they can get their full benefit for them. That's what we should have, right? And we should have concurrent receipt where you can get your disability and your retirement. We should make sure that there's no policies out there within our VA systems that say that doctors can decide not to treat a veteran because of their political affiliation or, that happened. And they said, oh, we're not going to do it. And I said, why'd you change the language then? Right?
Yeah.
People have served who are Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, not political at all, right? Gay, straight, black, white, Asian, from other countries, non-citizens in our military, right? We've had the gambit of it because they believed in a dream. They believed in America, and to not respect that service, right, is wrong.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that Bergman, you know, where he's getting money from these companies. And I know that that's a big issue when it comes, you know, Citizens United. People more than ever are seeing where their representation is getting money from. And for most people, you work for who pays you. And people see that with the representation, that the representatives work for who pays them. And I know that, you know, between Citizens United and right now in Michigan, there is a ballot initiative called Mop Up Michigan. And what it seeks to do is it seeks to get some of that corporate utility money out of politics. You know, data centers are such a huge issue in Michigan, you know, so it seeks to make sure that they can't make donations to people who would regulate them. And corporations with over $250,000 in annual contracts with the government. You know, where do you stand on something like that in Citizens United?
Oh, we need money out of politics. We need money out of politics. It's common sense, and we all know it.
Yeah.
Right? Even when you look at the makeup of Congress, most people who represent us are in the top 1% of income earners. Right? So even that's Republican or Democrat. Yeah, money is a problem. We all know it. Even if you look at our representation in Congress, most folks who right or left who are in Congress are already wealthy. right? I'll hear people and they'll say, well, Callie, if you get in, don't lose sight. Don't then scam us all and become a millionaire, right? They think that once you get in, then somehow you become fabulously wealthy. And really, it's the opposite. We have people who are fabulously wealthy who then can afford to actually run for Congress, who then get in, because it's hard to run. Mm-hmm. And you have to raise money to advertise. And we have, it's expensive to be on TV and to do all the things that you need to do. And then you have this whole consultant class of folks who want to get paid, and it's a whole ecosystem that makes it difficult for folks who come from working class backgrounds to actually run and represent the communities that they come from.
Absolutely. And is there anything, like if you could give the voters sort of your pitch, let them know what you're about, who you are, what they can expect from you, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that we have never been at a more serious time in American history than I'm calling it history because I often think about what my kids and grandkids are going to look back on. We have never been in a more serious time. America, this is our 250th year, and we have to make a real serious decision about whether we're going to continue on as a republic, as a democracy, and whether we as ordinary common people are going to matter. Because that's what this is about. Are we going to matter for the next 100, 200 years? Are we going to have a say? Do we trust each other enough to govern over ourselves? Because that's what democracy is. It's this promise that we see the value and the worth in each other, and that we trust each other enough to elect a government by us and for us. We were the first democracy after 2,000 years after the fall of the Roman Republic. What happened was special, and we've had to come back over time. Do we really believe all people are equal? Do we really believe everyone should have a shot? And we have a civil war over it. We have the civil rights movement, the labor movement, the women's suffrage movement, and we're not done yet. But we have to decide that today for us. And right now up here, I'm running on an affordable life. I hope folks can follow along and be a part of this, but we should all demand that. We should demand nothing less.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for sitting down with me, for doing this interview. And that's Callie Barr running for Michigan's 1st U.S. Congressional District. The Michigan primary for this will be on August 4th. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.